On the vast plains of North Dakota, John took over a new farm. It was supposed to be a place of hope and dreams of harvest. Yet now the land was shrouded in shadows of despair. John was an honest and simple farmer, working tirelessly every day in his cornfield. He was filled with longing for the future, hoping every stalk of corn would grow strong and bring the joy of harvest. This was not only his love for the land, but also the entire livelihood of his family. But fate was cruel, as a sudden drought swept in like a demon. The scorching sun baked the earth mercilessly, leaving the land cracked with grim fissures. The once green and full corn withered under the onslaught of drought, drooping lifelessly. John was anxious and heartbroken, staring at the drying soil and dying crops, knowing that if he couldn't find a solution soon, a whole year of hard work would be wasted. Helpless, John took out a loan from the bank to buy irrigation equipment and fertilizer for the crops. Through his tireless work day and night, the corn finally showed signs of recovery, slowly regaining life. But fate always seemed to play tricks on him. When one problem ended, another soon followed. Flocks of crows suddenly appeared from nowhere, covering the cornfield in black. These crows were like crazed raiders, feasting on the nearly ripe corn and trampling the crops into ruin. John tried everything he could, waving his arms, making loud noises to scare them away, but the crows seemed enchanted, unmoved by his efforts, continuing to enjoy their feast. Frustrated, John went to the barn, planning to find some tools to deal with the crows. But as he grabbed a tool, the wall of equipment suddenly collapsed, revealing a hidden passage. Curious, John opened the wooden door to the passage, and what he saw was a terrifying scarecrow. This scarecrow had a strange design. Its face twisted, its hollow eyes staring into endless darkness, its whole body exuding a chilling aura. As John looked at it, an idea rose in his mind. He decided to place the scarecrow in the cornfield to drive the crows away. When he told his family about it, his son Michael strongly objected. Michael looked at the scarecrow in terror, his eyes filled with pleading, begging his father not to put it in the cornfield. He felt the scarecrow was far too frightening, and it seemed to hide some dark secret. Hearing his son's fear, John promised him, swearing that he would never place it in the cornfield. That afternoon, John brought back 2 sacks of corn from the field, planning to check their quality. But while he was carefully inspecting them, the scarecrow in the barn suddenly moved slightly.
Jesus Christ!
It turned out to be his wife Mary, who was sorting through old things in the barn. Since John had poured all their savings into the farm, Mary thought about selling old items to a friend to earn a little money. When John heard she was selling them to her ex, he felt uneasy inside. But since he was desperate to save the crops, he didn't argue too much. That night, as John slept, something strange happened. The barn door opened on its own. When John woke in the morning, he saw a massive flock of crows flying out from the barn. When he entered, he discovered that the corn he had collected yesterday was completely devoured. Just as he was at his wit's end, his neighbor Jude came to visit. John learned that Jude had many years of farming experience, so he asked him how to deal with the crows. When Jude noticed the scarecrow in the corner, he suggested using it to scare them away. At first, John didn't want to, but driven into a corner by the relentless crows, he had no choice but to place the scarecrow in the field. He even carefully put a sun hat on the scarecrow as if that would help it guard the crops better. But strangely, the moment he set the scarecrow up, eerie sounds filled the air, like children softly singing a nursery rhyme. He searched around the field but found nothing, unable to trace the source of the voice. As he left the field, he saw his son. John asked Michael if he had just been in the cornfield, but Michael ignored him. When John asked his daughter, she revealed that Michael was upset because their father had promised not to put the scarecrow there. After saying this, she and her brother went to a friend's house. John felt guilty for deceiving his son, and he sat silently at the doorway, lost in thought. Mary then came over with a drink, noticing his gloom and asking what was wrong. John shared his troubles, saying that not only had the crows eaten a lot of corn, but the irrigation machine had also broken down. Mary comforted him, saying she believed they would soon get through this. The next morning, when the first rays of sunlight lit the field, John went to check on the crops as usual. What he saw left him stunned. Everywhere were dead crows, their bodies covering the ground. Around the scarecrow, the corpses were piled high. It was as if some mysterious force had slaughtered them in an instant, their feathers scattered, their eyes still wide open in terror. John was both shocked and overjoyed, never expecting the Scarecrow to be so effective. Delighted, he grabbed sacks to collect the bodies, planning to burn them in barrels. He felt secretly relieved at his decision. But what he didn't know was that these dead crows were only the beginning of the nightmare. The real horror was just about to begin. Not long after, the debt collector Chapman came knocking at the door. His attitude was extremely aggressive, and he viciously threatened John, saying that if he didn't pay soon, the land would be seized and auctioned off. It turned out that John's loan was due. But John angrily refused Chapman, because this land was the foundation his family had depended on for generations, and there was no way he could give it up so easily. John told Chapman he only needed a little more time, and if the corn could be harvested as expected, then he would definitely repay the loan. But Chapman remained firm, giving John no chance to breathe. He knew that if John's land was repossessed and auctioned, he could make a large profit. So he threw down harsh words and left. That night, eager to profit from John's downfall, Chapman secretly snuck into the cornfield, planning to plant an auction sign there as a way to intimidate John. But just as he placed the sign, strange noises came from within the cornfield. The sound was like heavy footsteps, and also like the harsh scrape of a sickle dragging across the ground. Chapman's heart skipped a beat, and he looked around in terror, only to see a tall figure slowly approaching from the darkness. The figure came closer, and Chapman finally saw it clearly. It was the shadow of the Scarecrow, holding a sharp sickle that gleamed coldly under the moonlight. Panicked, Chapman turned and ran. But just as he reached the road, a speeding truck came roaring toward him. With a scream, Chapman was struck and killed instantly. Since a death had occurred on the farm, the police began their investigation the next day. Learning that John and Chapman had previously clashed, Officer Milton questioned him about what had happened. But Mary provided John with an alibi, and Milton had no choice but to leave. After Milton left, John walked into the cornfield to check the situation. As he walked through the field, he suddenly found money scattered on the ground, as if it had emerged straight from the soil. At the Scarecrow's feet, he also discovered an expensive watch, which looked exactly like the one Chapman used to wear. Seeing this, John felt deeply puzzled. At that moment, eerie noises echoed again from the cornfield, making John shiver with fear, unsure of what was hiding there. Just as he was leaving, he ran into his neighbor Jude. Noticing John's nervous expression, Jude asked him what had happened. John told him about the things he had just found and asked Jude if he should return them. Jude replied that since John's family was already struggling to make ends meet, it would be better to keep the things and buy something for his wife and children, especially since Chapman was already dead. Hearing Jude's words, John suddenly realized, and he quickly went to the fertilizer market nearby to buy more supplies for his cornfield. The corn was now his only hope, and he believed that soon he would finally reap the harvest. But he had no idea that stranger things were still waiting for him. When John returned home, he found Mary talking with Tommy, and his mind immediately began imagining the worst. Mary had noticed John's increasingly strange behavior, so she had asked Tommy for advice. But Tommy believed John could never truly give her happiness, and deep inside, he wanted to win Mary back again. Yet Mary revealed her heart, saying she only loved John and their children. Hearing this, Tommy didn't push any further and quickly left. When John saw his wife, guilt welled up inside him, but Mary spoke words of encouragement. John felt he hadn't cared for her properly, and he promised that they would attend marriage counseling together to strengthen their relationship. As time passed, the strange events in the cornfield grew more frequent. That night, while eating corn outside the door, John discovered that he had lost a tooth. Not only that, but in his fear and panic, he suddenly saw his son near the cornfield. He believed Michael was angry at him and was trying to scare him. But when he chased after him, he found that Michael not only said things he couldn't understand, but also inexplicably transformed into the form of the Scarecrow. As his wife called out to him, John snapped out of it, relieved that it had all just been a terrifying nightmare. At that moment, Mary told him that the corn seemed to have changed dramatically overnight. Excited, John rushed to check the results of his work. Before he left, Mary reminded him not to forget their marriage counseling session that evening. John casually agreed and then went to the cornfield. There he saw that the corn truly had ripened much faster. Suddenly, John noticed a ring, and its appearance filled him with unease. Just as he was about to return and tell Mary, she came with shocking news. Mary said she had just received a phone call that Tommy had taken his own life in the park last night. Hearing the news, John was at a loss. Although he had felt some resentment toward Tommy yesterday, he never expected him to die so suddenly. At that moment, Mary accidentally noticed Tommy's ring on John's hand. She confronted her husband, asking if Tommy's death had anything to do with him, since she knew John had seen their conversation yesterday. But John insisted he had no idea what had happened. He wanted to tell her about the Scarecrow and the cornfield, but feared she wouldn't believe him. With no other choice, John promised his wife that he would get to the bottom of this. Seeing his sincere expression, Mary chose to believe him for the time being. Thinking of all the strange events in the cornfield, John felt sure the Scarecrow was connected. So he grabbed a hammer and went to take it down. But as soon as he started, he accidentally hurt his hand. Helpless, John returned home to treat the wound. Yet when he entered the house, he saw Mary together with Milton. It turned out that Officer Milton had come to investigate Tommy's death from last night, and after learning that Mary often sold old items to Tommy, he returned again to look into it. But Mary didn't mention the ring that John had found, so without more clues, Milton had no choice but to leave. After Milton left, John wanted to know why his wife hadn't spoken about the ring. Mary said she still believed him, but she didn't want him to keep a dead man's belongings because it made her feel sick. Soon after, John took an axe and returned to the Scarecrow, planning to get rid of it completely. But as he entered the cornfield, he heard that same familiar creaking sound again. Following the sound, he found a little girl standing beside the Scarecrow. The girl was wearing a white dress, her face pale, her eyes hollow. Curious, John walked up to her, wanting to ask why she was there. The girl looked at John and said coldly, "It only protects the land, not the people on the land." Frightened, John ran back to the house, filled with confusion and fear, not understanding what the girl meant. But he knew there had to be a terrible secret behind the Scarecrow. To uncover the truth, he decided to burn it. Late at night, he placed the Scarecrow in an oil barrel and set it on fire. Watching the Scarecrow burn, John felt a sense of relief, thinking everything was over. But just then, his wife and children returned home. Mary walked up to her husband and said they should spend some time apart, leaving John deeply confused. It turned out tonight was the day he had promised to attend marriage counseling with her, but he had forgotten completely because of the Scarecrow. Heartbroken, Mary turned away and left. But that wasn't the scariest thing. The most terrifying part came the next morning when John went back to the cornfield and found the Scarecrow standing there again. Shocked, John returned to the house to tell Mary, but she gave him no chance to explain and only wanted him gone from her sight. Helpless, John went to the barn door, trying to think of another way to deal with the Scarecrow. By coincidence, his neighbor Jude showed up at the barn. Taking a chance, John told Jude about the strange events with the Scarecrow. After hearing him out, Jude said that his wife Miranda might know something, because her father had once met a Native American on the farm and had been given a book about scarecrows. Believing the book might help, John went to Jude's house and received it from Miranda. It revealed that the Scarecrow had been created by an evil sorcerer, and it was given powerful magic that could protect the land, but the price was constant sacrifice of life. Whenever someone offended the land's owner, the Scarecrow would punish them, killing them and bringing their possessions back to the cornfield. John realized that by placing the Scarecrow in the field, he had opened a Pandora's box, unleashing a demon he could not control. Jude then tried to tempt John, saying that since he had already gained so much, why not let the Scarecrow give him even more? But John knew if it continued, his own life could be at risk, so he ran away in fear. When he returned, he encountered Officer Milton. Since he couldn't destroy the Scarecrow alone, John decided to ask Milton for help. He took Milton to the barn and even showed him the secret passage where he had found the Scarecrow. However, Milton thought John was talking nonsense, believing such an outrageous thing couldn't exist. Just then, Jude and Miranda suddenly appeared in the barn, startling them both.
Don't give me that look. You made a mess of everything. You don't deserve the blessings you received.
Get off my property.
Look, calm down, John.
The field is glorious now. It's just the beginning.
All these lands could be yours.
John didn't want to hear them anymore, and he shouted for them to leave. But Mary, hearing the noise, rushed over to the barn. When she saw John, she found him talking to himself. John tried to explain, but Mary then saw Milton unconscious in the corner of the barn, and she thought John had killed him. Terrified, she screamed, ran back to the house, and tried to take the children away from this dreadful place. But in the chaos, Michael accidentally ran into the cornfield, becoming lost and filled with fear. Suddenly, he saw a dark figure holding a sickle approaching him. Panicked, Michael ran back toward the barn. Hearing the screams from the field, John rushed toward the sound. As he arrived, he saw the lifeless bodies of Jude and Miranda. Their twisted corpses lay on the ground, the soil stained red. Before his death, Jude used his last ounce of strength to reveal the truth to John. Miranda had actually died long ago, murdered by Jude after she betrayed him, and a little girl who had witnessed it was also silenced. Miranda's spirit had since attached itself to the Scarecrow, and she wanted revenge on all who were guilty, with John's family as her next target. That meant Jude and Miranda had died here long ago, and the land John was farming now had once been their farm. Hearing this, John's only thought was to find his family. When he found Mary, she told him their son had gone missing in the cornfield. At that time, Michael was hiding behind a tractor in the barn, but he didn't realize the Scarecrow from the cornfield had appeared behind him. Terrified, Michael screamed again and again. Hearing the screams, John and his family hurried toward the barn. With nowhere else to hide, Michael escaped to the barn's loft. But as he got up there, he heard someone climbing the ladder.
Michael.
Milton, who had just regained consciousness, tried to rescue Michael, but he was killed by the Scarecrow inside the barn. Fortunately, John rushed over in time, grabbed a sickle, and engaged the Scarecrow in a desperate fight. But John was no match, and he was soon knocked down. The Scarecrow then attacked Lindsay, pinning her against the wall. Just as it was about to strike the fatal blow, Mary swung an axe and severed its arm, saving Lindsay at the last second. Seeing the Scarecrow attacking his mother and sister, Michael started the tractor and drove it straight into the monster. The Scarecrow was knocked to the ground, and John seized the chance to grab a sickle and hack at it relentlessly. Finally, under their combined efforts, the Scarecrow was completely destroyed. With its fall, everything grew quiet. John's family sat exhausted on the ground, staring at the chaos around them, their hearts heavy with emotion. They knew the nightmare was finally over. The next morning, the family packed their belongings and left the land filled with such painful memories. They decided to start a new life, somewhere else. As they departed, John turned back to look at the cornfield one last time, silently praying that such horror would never happen again. That's all for today. We'll see you next time.